Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Modern deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about $50 Temur Dragons in Modern. I'm very excited to share this list with you. As always, before we hop into the video, let me know in the comment section below at the end of the video, what do you think about the list? Is there any cards that I didn't include that I definitely should have? As well as if you have any suggestions for upcoming videos, just let me know in the comment section below, and I will definitely consider that. And speaking of suggestions, huge shout out to DVT Habit. Definitely a very spicy deck that they suggested. This isn't the first deck that they've suggested for sure. There's a lot of spicy decks that they've suggested for us to do on the channel. So huge shout out to them. My other thing I want to talk about first is, I'm not going to lie to you, this deck, it's a little clunky. I think overall it's a pretty good shell, but you know, with only $50, it's really tough to make a 3-color deck. I mean, it is really tough, especially with dragons, because, for instance, the Naya Sliver decks that we just did is a little bit easier because it's all just slivers. You know, there's no ramp or anything. It doesn't really need a lot of removal for the most part. But this is definitely just a whole different beast. But I think we kind of came up with a pretty solid $50 deck. So let's go ahead and hop into it here. So our 1-drops, staple ramp cards of the Modern format. We're playing 4 Arbor Elf and 4 Utopia Sprawl. They pretty much do the same thing in every deck. Obviously, if you're really lucky, you can have like 4 mana on turn 2 with a turn 1 Arbor Elf and a turn 2 Utopia Sprawl. But I'm just a big fan of those in general. Spoiler alert, you're going to be naming red most of the time with Utopia Sprawl. Occasionally, you'll be naming blue. It's not super common, but do keep that in mind. We're also playing 4 Lightning Bolt, staple card of the format, one of the best removal spells in the entire game. It's player removal and it's creature removal, technically planeswalker removal as well, and even, I mean, kind of battle removal in a way, but we're not going to talk about that. Anyways, those are fantastic 1-drops that we are playing. Next slide here is pretty much our 3-drops. So Bone Crusher Giant obviously is kind of a 2 and a 3-drop for the most part, but the card is super efficient, so that's why we're playing it. It's not a dragon, but it doesn't even matter. It's extremely efficient, and that's why we want to play Bone Crusher Giant. We're also playing 2 Kiora Behemoth Beckoner. It's a budget card, and it's good in the deck as well. Whenever we play a creature of power 4 or greater, we get to draw a card. And spoiler alert, a lot of our creatures are for power or more, which is really, really good for us. And then obviously the -1 untap target permanent helps us untap our lands, so that way we can actually cast some of our dudes a little bit easier. So definitely pretty sweet. Then we're also playing 4 Dragon's Horde. So Dragon's Horde is definitely a sweet card. 3-mana artifact. We could tap it for 1 mana of any color. But whenever a dragon enters the battlefield, under our control, we put a gold counter on it, and we can tap and remove a gold counter to draw a card, which is pretty sweet. I've played a lot of Dragon's Horde in Pioneer, and the card is pretty strong. I know at face value, it doesn't seem all that powerful, but you kind of have to play the card to truly appreciate it. And Dragon's Horde is a very, very solid card. I'm definitely a big fan of it. And what's great is it makes 1 mana of any color, so that way, you know, we don't have like a ton of blue sources for the most part in the deck, but Dragon's Horde definitely helps us with that. So definitely a big fan of the cards. All right, I know what you're thinking. Dragons. What are the dragons? We have some of our spicy dragons here. We're playing 4 Thunderbreak Region. The card is a staple in dragon decks. It doesn't matter what format you're playing. 4/4/5/4. Whenever dragon becomes a target of a spell or an ability opponent controls, they take 3. It's a staple card. I love Thunderbreak Region. One of my favorite dragons in the entire game. And guess what? It's only $1. The card's been reprinted 1,000 times. If you don't have any Thunderbreak Regions, I highly suggest picking them up at some point. We're also playing 1 Galazeth Prismari. I wanted to play more, but unfortunately it's tough just because, you know, it's a $3 card and it's tough in a $50 deck. But 4 mana, 3/4 flyer, when it enters, make a treasure. And then what's really sweet is artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. Spoiler alert, our other artifacts that make mana already, you know, can tap for any color mana, so it's not like huge, but what's cool is it makes the treasure token. That's pretty much why we're playing it. I'm just a big fan of Galazeth Prismari, and I tried to find some good blue dragons that we could put in the deck, and this one is definitely one of them. We're also playing 2 Imarith Desert Doom. 5/5 flyer for 5, has ward 4 if it's untapped, and then when it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Then if you have fewer than 3 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. I really just like it because it's a big beefy flyer, and it has ward 4 if it's untapped, so that way we can play it, and then that way it's not immediately going to die to a removal spell. You know, hopefully by the time we attack with it, mostly in the post board, we'll maybe have a protection spell for it. But if they do end up removing it, you know, that's kind of how it goes. Our creatures do get removed, but at least when it's untapped, it's really hard for them to take out Imarith. So definitely a big fan of it in general. I've been wanting to play it a lot in Pioneer. Haven't found the right list for it, but I'm sure at some point we definitely will. So let's go and hop into some of our big beefier dragons here. We're also playing 4 Glorybringer and 2 Stormbreath Dragon as our other 5 drops. There's really nothing I can say about Glorybringer and Stormbreath Dragon. Staple dragon cards of a number of different formats. The cards are incredible. My personal favorite 5-mana dragons, pretty much. I thought about playing Thundermaw Hellkite in the list overall, but I decided to just stick with Glorybringer and Stormbreath Dragon just based on kind of how the meta is shaping up overall. I think they're just kind of overall better, just because Glorybringer, obviously taking out creatures is always relevant. Stormbreath Dragon's protection from white is really good against like Solitude, for instance. It's also really good against Leyline Binding, which is pretty huge in the format. Then finishing out our deck, we're playing 2 Summoning Trap. So here's my little bit of story with Summoning Trap, which Galzeth Prismari helps us ramp into Summoning Trap, which is kind of cool. But the main reason I wanted to play Summoning Trap is because there's a lot of counterspells going around the format right now. Yes, it has to be a creature spell counter, but if our opponent, if they counterspell any of our creatures, like actual counterspell, boom, Summoning Trap. All of a sudden look at the top 7, put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. I thought about playing See the Unwritten. I originally had like a deck, like a Hypersonic Dragon, like See the Unwritten style kind of thing going on, and ultimately decided to not play that, but I really wanted to play an effect like that, so that's why we are playing Summoning Trap. The card is sweet. I've been wanting to feature it for a while, and I think that this is the perfect deck for it. So that's our entire main board, except for our lands. And again, a little bit of a disclaimer, the lands are very, very clunky, but I think it's all going to make sense here in a second. Okay, so we're playing 4 Cinderglade, 4 Wooded Ridgeline, and 2 Highland Forest as our main dual lands in the deck. So again, the idea is with Utopia Sprawl, we need to put them on forests. They have to be on a forest for it to be able to do anything, essentially, and that's why we're playing all these different ones. Cinderglade is the best one, but unfortunately, most of the dual lands with typing in this format are not very, cost friendly for us for our $50 deck, and these are the best options that we have. Yes, they do come into play tapped, which is a little bit awkward, but, we're not trying to race out our dragons per se. We're just trying to ramp into them. We can take a turn off to play the Utopia Sprawl. Really not a big deal for us for the most part, but it's still, obviously, there's a good chance we can still have it come to play untapped, but at least it makes sense. Arbor Elf can also untap these because it has the forest typing on it. Just wanted to mention that as well. Then we're also playing 2 Yavimaya Coasts in for Temple of the Dragon Queen. Yavimaya Coast is great, obviously, because it makes the green or blue that we need. Temple of the Dragon Queen is also fantastic. If we reveal a dragon, it can come to play untapped, and then as it enters, we choose a color, and then we could tap it for 1 mana of the chosen color. Most of the time, we're going to be naming red or green with this, but if we still need some blue mana, we can just name blue, and it's perfect. What's also great is Kiora is great for, if we're missing a color mana, if we need another red mana or another blue mana, we can just tap the land and then untap it with Kiora, which is pretty sweet, which is also part of the reason I decided to put Kiora in the list. And then rounding out our lands, we're playing 4 forests and 3 mountains. Obviously, we wanted more forests than mountains just because we need targets for Utopia Sprawl. And then as our spicy basic land of the day, I think I featured these before on the channel. We're playing the very, very cool Dragons of Tarkir basics just because, obviously we're playing a dragon deck. What better cards to play, what basics to play than the Dragons of Tarkir basics. Definitely a big fan of both of these artworks in general. So, all right, that's our entire main board, but don't go anywhere. We still have to talk about our sideboard as well as some budget options. So, sideboarding is very, very simple for a $50 deck. We're going to want some Graveyard Hate, and Tormod Script is my personal favorite. You can also play Soul Guide Lantern if you'd like to. It's also something to keep in mind. Also really cool with, if you don't need the mana right away, with Galzeth Prismari, it's artifacts you control. So we could tap our Tormod Script for some mana for an instant sorcery if we do need to, which I think that's pretty hilarious. We're also going to want some extra removal and interaction. Definitely a number of different cards we could play in terms of extra removal and interaction. Counterspells are great. I highly recommend cards like Mana Leak. Counterspell double blue is going to be really hard for us to cast, especially on curve, so I would probably recommend a card like Mana Leak. Extra removal, you kind of have a smorgasbord of options for the most part. If you want like extra board wipes, you could play like Anger of the Gods or Sweltering Sun. If you're looking for like extra targeted removal, I would recommend cards like Dead and Gone or Beast Within. I believe I'm playing Beast Within in my actual sideboard, which if you want to check out the sideboard, exactly what I'm playing, it's going to be in the description below. And then the last thing, kind of like what we talked about, counter spells, Mana Leak is personally what I would play. You could also play cards like Stubborn Denial or Spell Pierce, all fantastic options for the most part. And then as well as our upgrade options, which is really simple. Again, the first thing I would do is upgrade those dual lands. If you have any shock lands, check lands, anything floating around, I highly suggest playing those. You could also play some good utility lands, which it double dips a little bit with utility lands and dual lands. You know, if you have any like Cavernous Souls or Haven of the Spirit Dragons, those are pretty good to play in the deck just because they make any color mana, which is pretty sweet. And the biggest additions I would say to get for the deck is Birds of Paradise and Sarkhan Fireblood. I wanted to include these in the list, but again, with the $50 budget, it was extremely tough and I wasn't able to put them in there. Birds of Paradise is definitely the best option. You could also even play Ignoble Hierarch or even Noble Hierarch as well in the deck. Sarkhan Fireblood is great though just because it makes any color mana for our dragons, which is sweet. Because realistically, if we're just playing a couple blue dragons, we could almost just play birds and Sarkhan Fireblood and then like maybe just 2 blue sources, and that'll make all the blue mana that we need, which is pretty sweet. So essentially Kiora is like our budget version of Sarkhan for the most part in the deck. So, well, that takes us to the end of the video. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the list? Is there a dragon that I definitely should have included in the deck that I did not? Just let me know in the comment section below. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.